Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
And thanks, Simon, for having me. I
I love our
appreciate your input.
conversation that we're going to have today because it's something I think about a lot, and that's resilience. And I think about mental resilience, physical resilience. I feel like to be successful or even just to live in this world, the way the world is, then resilience is kind of like one of the foundations. But let me start from the very beginning with you. What is resilience?
Sure. So I work with a gentleman named J.C. Glick. He's a former Army Ranger. We launched a managed group called Resilience Optimized. And I share that with you because I want to contextualize Resilience 1.0 with Resilience 2.0. So in the mainstream, Resilience 1.0 is mostly, not completely, but mostly about physical capability. Like a David Goggins who wakes up in the morning and runs 100 miles before breakfast, or Jocko Willemick who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning and lifts heavy weights. Those are great. That's what's of interest to you, and it is important in my mind to be physically capable. Okay, so I'm not suggesting you're not. That's not important. It is actually in my program. That's the basis of the other capabilities I want people to develop, including emotional resilience, mental resilience, spiritual resilience, and interpersonal resilience. So one way you can think about resilience is you fall down 6 times, you get up 7. Like life can be hard, it can be challenging, it can be a lot of adversity. Are you capable of facing the adversity, learning, growing, adapting, and evolving from it? The more resilient you are, the more capable you're doing that. And it's not just about like the V negativity, like I get hit by life and I fall down and I get back up. But it's also like using that as an opportunity to look at oneself and say, hey, I want to celebrate these strengths that I have. Like I'm really capable of doing these things. I survived this long. I don't want to just survive. I want to thrive. What do I need to develop in terms of capacities, skills, inner resources to really take on this world? And for me, part of the resilience is like not just bouncing back, but like thriving and like having an offensive mindset. Like I love life. Yes, it can be hard, but I want to thrive in this life. It's a short period of time and I'm going to make the most of this. That is one way
Is,
that I
is, is that
consider
sort of like a
resilience.
mindset you've had to cultivate over time, just to have that I'm almost going to say like a zest for life or a love for life. But we all know life is tough and challenging, and but it's almost like a mindset that you've had to create, which is no matter what, I'm going to try and enjoy this moment.
Completely. And there's a great picture. So I spent a decade working for Commander Mark Devine, Navy SEAL, at SEAL Fit, helping run programs, build programs, launch programs. And I have a great picture of a friend of mine, Heather Perillo, and she's doing one of our training programs. It's a model for Hell Week, and it's like she's training for like 50 hours. It's a ball busting workout. And she's wearing her shirt, that says Perillo on it, and she's smiling. And I love that picture because that is what to your question is so important. That can be cultivated. I'm not suggesting life is easy and unicorns and rainbows. Yeah, hopefully you have many moments of that in your life, but life throws it, God, life, whatever you want to say, can throws a lot of adversities your way. And if you can cultivate the mindset to face life with that smile that I love Heather having on her picture, that can be done. It's really important to be done. And that's what I work with clients to
Yeah.
do.
So let's. It's such an interesting topic. I'd like to think about where do you start. So when you're working with a client, what are the beginning things to understand? Probably maybe it starts with an assessment, but to understand where they are with their mindset, and then what needs to start to improve.
Yeah, that's a great question, Simon. So I work in 4 pillars with my individuals. I also work with couples, and I also go to the men's group. The the 4 pillars are physiological, psychological, social, and environmental. So even before I get to the mindset per se, I do a lot of physiological work. And what I mean by that is you probably have this experience because I know I have. If you feel like crap, you're tired, you're exhausted, you're worn out, it's really hard to have a positive mindset. It's really hard to have a growth oriented mindset to be resilient. So what I work with clients on is dialing in aspects of their physiology, diet, nutrition, movement, and fitness. Sleep is one of the most important ones. Stress management, help them live within with circadian biology in mind, 24 day night cycles. So I help them either at a gross level or a subtle level dial those things in. When I say by a gross level, some people don't eat well at all. Some people don't exercise. Some people, their sleep habits are really effed up. So we have a lot of work to do. Others are like kind of in the biohacker space and they're doing pretty well or they're doing well, but they can do subtly better. So like I do a lot of work in that space because if you're feeling better, you have more energy, then that the mindset work is easier. Not necessarily easy, but definitely easier. So physiological
So what top
work is
tips, I
first.
suppose, can you take from that physiological piece? And it's an interesting thing because we're talking about sleep here as being one of the key pillars. I'm a new dad. Sorry, I'm a, I'm a dad of Logan who's
Wow.
4, but I'm also
Congratulations.
a new dad again to Luca, and who's now 6 weeks, 7 weeks old. So I'm all very familiar, and so is my wife, with the sleepless nights. And one of the things that was really falling apart for me was I went about 6 weeks with every night was a broken sleep because I was even looking after one of them, and also trying to come to work and all that kind of stuff. And it was just like I remember saying to her, I was like, I feel like 10% of the man that I normally do before we had baby. And then we had to like look at our sleep routine and how can we make it work, especially if I need to come to work and everything else. And that's interesting because that was the first pillar. My everything else is reasonably fine like, in terms of like nutrition and diet, but sleep, critical component. What advice or can you give to someone to ensure they've got good sleep hygiene?
Yeah, and I definitely will give some suggestions. But I'm curious, how did you guys figure that out for
Well, I
yourself?
think when you have a baby and you're waking up 2 or 3 times a night, because of the feeds, that's number one. You know fundamentally it's that you have a sleep problem, sleep deprivation. I think the difference is with my wife because she's at home, she's able to rest during the day when the baby sleeps and Logan can go off to preschool. The difference with me is I come to work and I have to be on all day. So it's just a different situation. And that's therefore we've had to kind of sit down and communicate around the roles. And then when I'm going to do the feeds, because I still want to be there for baby, I don't want to always be my wife, but then we just had to look at the roles and go, actually, some of these feeds that we're doing, like we're both awake for them. That's not helping anybody. So can we look at the roles and everything else quite quickly, by the way, if like a week or two later, and I've been able to rest properly, I'm completely back to the man I was. And that's good. But it's just interesting because, it was one minor component, but it impacts everything. And then at that moment, I was stressed. I wasn't eating well. It's like the initial pillar for someone who also goes to the gym and trains, all those sorts of things. But that initial pillar of sleep falling, and then it impacts 80% of everything else.
So, as you know, I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist. I've been coaching for 25 years, trained as a marriage and family therapist for 30 years. I want to say, as a therapist, I really appreciate the fact that you can sit down and have a conversation with your wife, talk about roles, and make sure you're both are taken care of and taking care of your child. That's a beautiful thing to hear. So, I applaud
Thank
you
you.
guys for that. That's really cool. Yeah, on the sleep front, so I follow the advice of Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's a former SEAL medical doctor, sleep specialist, and a friend of mine, and I followed his work for a long time. A couple basic, really easy things, and this is assuming you're not doing shift work. You're not doing shift work. Not doing shift work because that changes everything. But you basically want to go to bed around the same time every night. You want to determine if you can through epigenetics testing the amount of sleep you actually need. There are certain tests you can take which show you bio individually what your sleep requirements are. Some people need 8 hours, some people need 7 hours, some people do 5, 6.5 hours, some people do 9 hours. There's a range, but everyone's kind of unique within that range, and it can be helpful to find out where you land in that range. Then you can organize your day and night based on that. That's one thing. Um, I use sleep goggles or sleep masks. You can get blackout blinds. You want to have the room as dark as possible. I keep it cold. From what I understand from research from Kirk Parsley, a little colder is better. It induces more sleep. You don't want to be typical device. Don't be on your device. Don't be watching TV. Don't device me your iPad, your iPhone, your computer. You know, don't eat at least 3 hours before you go to bed. If you can help not do that, there's certain supplements one can take. I can share what I take. I'm not going to recommend this for everyone because they either a functional medicine doctor to determine what they might use. But like magnesium is one thing that I take. I find that to be really helpful. I also would recommend for some of my clients to use like binaural beats and a guided meditation to train the brain into a certain state, which helps relax the system. And then the guided meditation, you can get ones for sleep, relaxation, rest, that helps kind of bring the whole system down into a calm, cool way. So those are a few of the things I recommend that folks do. And then, if you can within the 24-hour day-night cycle, and I'm a fan of Huberman Labs, but I've been recommending this for like decades now. He just has the science to prove what I intuitively knew. If you can wake up with the sun, be outside, watch the sunrise, if it's safe, barefoot on the ground so you can get grounded, that seems to set your system up nicely for the rest of the day. And at the end of the day, if you can watch the sunset, being outside, weather permitting, safety permitting, that seems to set the system to start calming down at night. And then what I also recommend clients do is I have them journal. Different for the morning, but I'll just share with you at nighttime what I have them journal. At the nighttime, I have them journal reflecting back on their day, like what did they learn, wins, things they want to improve upon. It's both like to look at the day for what I could have done better and what I did well. It's also kind of a data dump, like get it out of your head. Because a lot of people bring their work, their life into their bedroom, into their sleep, and then have disruptive sleep. The more you can get things out so you're not thinking about it before you go to bed, the better. And part of what I call the PM ritual are some of these things. What things can you do to relax the system? Like the binaural beats, like the guided meditation, like the magnesium or other plenty of other supplements one might take. And then if you happen to take any kind of prescription-based or other kind of medicine for sleep, I'm not a doctor, but I'd highly recommend you talk to a functional medicine doctor because from my understanding of a lot of the research, these things will put you to sleep, but they don't necessarily give you deep, restful sleep. See, that's a concern over the long haul. And then I'm a device junkie, Apple Watch or a Ring. I have Garmin Watch, so you can also track your sleep, deep sleep, rest, REM, latency, those kind of things. So you can see over time how well you're doing. And then what I have clients do is track lots of different things throughout the day. You can start seeing what happens during the day that might affect you at night for your sleep. Food has an effect. You start like, wow, if I eat this, my sleep is poor. I drink this, my sleep is poor, meaning like alcohol mostly at night. Or if I have caffeine too late in the day and I'm not at fast metabolism of caffeine, that could be a problem. You start looking at various variables in your daytime that have an effect on your sleep. And all these devices are useful tools to track those things. So those are like just a handful of things.
Excellent. Okay. That's really helpful. It's really helpful. There's so many nuggets in there to improve things around sleep, but also your physiological health. Is there anything else? You're talking about the different kind of areas where people can focus on in their improvement. Is there anything else from a physiological perspective that's really important before we even get into things like mindset and resilience?
Yeah, so, and this does connect to the psychology piece, but I kind of put it in the physiological piece, how one does stress. Have you ever done a Whole30 diet?
I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to guess it's that you eat whole foods for 30 days.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just using this as an analogy because it's really helpful to answer your question. So yeah, the whole food diet, very popular here in the States, and it's like you get rid of grains, you get rid of dairy, you really restrict to very clean food, not including those things for 30 days. And then you start slowly reintroducing things and you see if you have not an allergy to them, but a sensitivity. Okay. And I use this as an analogy because what's amazing is people do that and they're like, oh my God, I don't have arthritis. My GI upset is gone. My brain fog has disappeared. And then they reintroduce certain foods like, oh my God, my brain fog's back. My tendons hurt, my ligaments hurt, my legs hurt. All the stuff comes back, digestive issues. They didn't know they felt like crap until they felt better. Okay. And I use it as an analogy because in stress, people don't know they're stressed until they're not. But most people that I'm aware of literally walk around in a chronic stress state. But it's their norm, so they don't even know that they're stressed. So what I think can be helpful, similar to a Whole30, is something similar. So like, I might even suggest a client go get a massage, a real good deep massage. and they walk, or a sensory deprivation tank. I love float tanks. So do a float tank for like 90 minutes. And you come out of the massage, you come out of the float tank, and your whole body just relaxed, and you just feel really good, and you're really calm, cool. And then life happens, and you go back to that stress state. You're like, oh my God, I am really effing stressed. I didn't know it. So once you have that baseline of what it feels like to feel good, even for 30 minutes or 45 minutes until it all comes back, then you know where you want to be working towards for the most part. So on my work with people with stress, I have them track the issue and their physiological and psychological reaction to the issue, so they can start developing awareness of how they do stress. It affects their respiration, their breath. What affects on the muscle? Is there tightness, constrictions, contractions of the muscle? Jaws get tight, shoulders get tight. Do I have GI issues that arise when you're stressed? The more you become aware of that, then we can develop tools, strategies, and tactics to help them deal with stress much better. But you can't really do that until you have a baseline. What my body feels like unstressed. That's really helpful, because if you can learn to turn down that system and get into parasympathetic activation at night, much more deep sleep, much more healthy sleep, much more restorative.
It's interesting, isn't it, how all of these things are reciprocal. So if you start to reduce, no, not reduce, when you start to remove the foods that create cravings. So therefore, if you go to the whole foods diet for 30 days, I actually have a whole foods diet, by the way, and I discovered this all of last year when I focused fully on just eating whole foods, real foods only. And gosh, the way I felt 3 or 4 months later was light years. So I took out sugar, I didn't drink alcohol, and I didn't have any takeaways. So I just ate fruits, vegetables, meats, etc. Oh my word, the how you feel is until you feel like that, and you walk and you journal and you do those sorts of self-care things, you don't know what you're missing out on. I felt better than any drug I've ever done. Yeah, I mean, and that's the funny thing, is like the diet keeps us back so much, like the sugar, inflammation, how you feel, the constant craving of the next alcoholic drink, or you don't realize it, but like, when was the last time you had one chocolate? Never. It's addictive. Crisp, it's addictive. And so it's really incredible, because when you don't have that craving, which I just think of as addiction, for the next thing, you feel calm, you feel considered, you feel clear, like you feel totally different as a human being. It's really special. So I love the piece of advice that you're offering to someone here.
I love that you played around with that and you had a deep experience, because now you can compare and contrast. And if you decide to eat something that's not on your list and you feel like crap, you're like, I'm an adult, I can take a choice, but there's consequences. Now I feel like crap, and you know that, and you can make better decisions next time you choose, which is awesome. In terms of like that, besides food, I'm thinking like devices, iPhones and all the stuff. One of the things I recommend to clients, not all my clients can do this, but like, can you go into nature for 72 hours to a week? No phones. I mean, you can have a phone for safety reasons, but like, you're not on your phone all day long, on your computer all day long. Because what I find very similar to what you just shared with your diet, I shared about stress management, relaxation versus sympathetically activated or hypersympathetically activated, is that if you go in nature for 3 days to 5 days, and you start coordinating your biorhythms with nature, your whole system kind of shifts towards what we've evolved to be in, which is the 24-hour day-night life cycle. And being device free, you can start noticing when you're going back into life, the real world, whatever you might want to call it, how addicted you are. Because you go from a very calm system to like, oh my God, I got ding, 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 whatever the notifications are on, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, text, phone calls, all that stuff. But once again, it gives you an adult choice. Like, wow, I felt really good without all that stuff. Can I create some boundaries with this stuff to give me a little bit more free time for spaciousness in my system, less noise in the system, more relaxation, more time for contemplation, connection, love, care, and compassion for human beings, less.
I love this is where it starts. I love this is where it starts. It's just, just in changing just in implementing some of those physiological things for you, it's actually life changing for someone to go through those changes, especially if you implement it long term. When you work with clients who implement some of those changes, what's the sort of feedback that you get?
Very similar to what I heard you say. Like, yeah, they just feel so much better. Like things they thought were normal in their system. Like I thought I was relaxed. I realized how stressed I am. Now I'm really relaxed. I'm less stressed. Like, oh my God, I just feel so much more calm, cool, collected. The dietary changes. I have more energy. I'm less doing this throughout the day and craving and looking for the next thing to eat. You know, brain fog disappears. GI upset disappears. Other bodily discomforts and pains disappear. All that stuff. They have more energy, vitality. And then that gives them the ability to show up differently in their life, both for their partner, if they're married, or their friends, or their coworkers, or workmates, whoever happens to be. But just as important or more important for themselves, like they actually have energy to go get a life they want to create for themselves moving forward.
Yeah,
it's just a really beautiful
and just
thing.
from making those changes, I say just, but they are quite significant changes. But from making those changes, it's interesting because I'd imagine someone's stress levels just naturally reduce because they're sleeping better, they're eating better, they're not stressing their system by having too much sugar or processed foods, etc. What sort of improvements do you see there?
Well, I'm thinking of a client that I'm working with now who lost 30 pounds, and he's not taking any kind of drugs. He just started eating well. He started working out. Not crazy. He's not like a Jocko Willink, David Goggins workouts, but 30, 45, 4 times a week. And in, I think it was 4 months, he's lost 30 pounds, which is just amazing. Now, he didn't come to me to lose weight. Like, that is a side effect of just getting his life in order. So he's looking good. But more important for me, for him, like, he is literally showing up differently for his kids, his girlfriend. I know his boss at work, like he's showing up differently at work because he's feeling better. He has less all that stuff inside himself. And then we've been working on the mindset stuff. Like he's taking on life, I would like to say, as an adventure. He's being much more playful. He's much more curious. And that's showing up literally in all areas of his life. And it's just really cool. And it's foundational to like him feeling better. Because like I said at the very beginning, if you feel like crap, it's really hard to make these changes in your life, psychologically speaking. But if you're feeling good, it's easier to make these changes. So like for him, it's like he started feeling good. He started doing good.
That's amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, that really is amazing. That is amazing. What's the next step? So we talked about physiological. What are the next steps? Where do you go from here?
So the second pillar is psychological, and there's 5 different pieces of it: cognitive, emotional, somatic, energetic, and spiritual. So the cognitive one, I work with clients on how they think about their thinking, when they speak, their tone and volume of the language they use. And it could be as simple as having them track how they say what they say and when they say what they say to themselves and to others. And many people that I find, those conversations are pretty negative. Like the way they talk to themselves, the way they talk to themselves about themselves, the way they talk to other people. And that's not really conducive to a growth mindset. That's a fixed mindset. So like we just start being aware of like how they do those things. And then we start shifting the language that they use. And that's just the first easy, quick step that they can do. And it's pretty brilliant. And also looking at the language, is it passive language or active language? I wish, I want. So they're waiting for things to happen in their lives as opposed to like taking a much more active, assertive stance in their lives. Just language can shift how they show up for themselves in the world. Because that's one thing in the cognitive space. Any questions on that before I go into the other 4?
It's interesting, isn't it? So something I've heard recently off podcasts is from a cognitive perspective, where we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about subconscious and the conscious brain, and that, and I don't know if the cognitive piece goes into this, but I do find this an interesting subject. That we're conscious of 5% of our brain, and the subconscious is running 95% of our brain, and it's that. When you're going into the thoughts, the communication, all those sorts of things, what are you generally experiencing there? Are you experiencing if I think about my past, you have a lot of negative self-doubt, you can have self-esteem issues. I think it all comes from that cognitive function. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just did this with a client yesterday. So for instance, if I'm having this particular client write up 25 things that they're boasting about themselves. And she's very humble. And she's like, I can't boast about myself. It's not in my system. So that's why you're going to do it. Okay. So I'm having to write these things up. But what I told her to do is be very mindful of each one she writes and listen for the conversation that occurs as she writes this on, either types it on the computer or writes it on. Because my guess, knowing her, working with her, that she's going to say something nice about herself and then she's going to destroy that comments in her own mind. And what I want to do with clients when I do that is it's not like feel happy, like just read the positive things and you're just going to change your life. For me, that's important. Yes, you want to start doing the positive stuff, but you want to be aware of how the negative stuff starts showing up. And when I start showing up, I don't just mean cognitively, like the conversation inside your own head. That's important, but it goes to the fourth thing, the third thing, the somatic piece. How does that show up in your physical system? When you start thinking poorly of yourself, like beating yourself up or whatever it is, lacking confidence, it literally shows up in your human system, not just in your mind. Meaning, there's a breathing pattern that supports that. There's a body posture that might support that. Because I have to imagine you see people who you can literally look at and see their lack of confidence in their body. They're kind of like this. And if you look very closely, you can see people who dealt with trauma. Sometimes like their back, like they have fear. There's a fear response kind of built in their system. So you can watch really closely the body language. It shows the psychology really clearly. So I help people become aware of all that stuff, not just how they talk about themselves, how it shows up in the body. And that's where a lot of the unconscious stuff is. Because we don't go, wait, I'm unconfident, therefore I have to hold my breath, tighten my chest, collapse my shoulders. It's not an automatic reaction. We've learned over time due to a incident or multiple different incidents in most likely our childhood. That's where usually all begins. Or even in our adulthood. That's where a lot of unconscious stuff is, and that's where I kind of do the deep dive into to unpack. It's not just how we talk to ourselves. And then I do dream work. Like dream work is a great way to start being aware of unconscious processes. And then just in your day-to-day conversations, the more aware you are of yourself, you can start noticing unconscious processes emerging. Like, people don't notice it, but they're tapping their fingers out of nervousness, as an example. I'm making a guess. They're nervous. They're tapping their feet out of nervousness. They cross their arms. Now, these things are not universal. Everyone might mean different things for these things, but they start noticing when they're in uncomfortable situations that they have certain habits, what physical habits that they might do to help protect themselves against a real or perceived threat, whatever it happens to be. Become consciously aware of that. That's the unconscious. I think you said 95% is going on in the back of the head, kind of the sensory motor part of the brain. You start getting control over those things. You relax the system. You manage the system differently, and then you can make different decisions in your life because you're not driven by these reactive physiological, psychological.
It really
states.
does. It really does.
Does that make sense?
It makes me think about 4 or 5 years ago, longer 5 years ago now,
Yeah.
when I before I did any work in terms of working with a coach or working through my psychology and all those sorts of things, I was going through a really difficult time. I was going through depression, and I often think about that time because I was unconscious of why, and also like the feedback that I would have often. So, for example, I might receive a nasty email at work or something that's maybe difficult. And then it's really interesting because then that would mean something to me. I would take offense to it, and then that would send me off in a spin for a certain reason or whatever. And it would take me days or weeks. I'd hold on to that and not be able to recover. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because until you start doing the work and working with someone, can you uncover the reasons? Because a lot of that, I would say, was unconscious. I was in a fit of rage. I was angry. I was violated. The funny thing is, until you actually do the work I can only use the words do the work because it's such a long journey to do the work, which we can go into what that looks like. But until you start really having that self-inquiry and doing the work, whether it's journaling, meditation, all of those things, all the above, to release the attachment of something, because so many of our actions are unconscious. I'm angry about this thing. Why is it happening? If that same thing happens to me today, which it still does, by the way, often because the world that we're in, I just means nothing. It's like, if anything, now I can look at something and just have empathy for the person that sent the email and feel like, I wonder what's going on in their day. I wonder if they're okay. Because why would you send that?
That's right.
It's so interesting because until you do the work to release that level of attachment, which is exactly what you're going on to here, which is you've got to almost become aware, self-aware of the things that are going on inside your brain, but around you as well, for you to be able to respond better. And I had no idea of that 5 years ago when I was going through a difficult time. And that's the journey that I know I've been on. So I know it's possible for people. So if anyone today is listening to this thinking, well, I'm just an angry person, or, it's just the situation I'm in, I can't get out of it or something. What would your message be for that?
All right. So it's really interesting because my message would be different depending on where the person is in their stages of development. If they're doing any work, a lot of work, no work at all. So this is not a universal statement, because for someone who says I'm stuck in this and I can't get out of it, I might say, depending on where they're at in that process, is that really true? Or is that your mindset? Is that how you perceive the situation? Can you imagine yourself, or could you imagine someone else that's easier for you in a similar situation, but seeing it differently? Because, maybe it's hard for them to see outside their own limitations, their own box they put themselves in. But maybe they put themselves in someone else's similar situation. They might be able to say, oh, wait, there are some factors here that I'm taking, like decisions I'm taking, that's contributing to this situation. I can deal with that. Oh, wait, maybe there's a conversation that needs to take place with this other person. Maybe, like, sometimes other people aren't going to change. Cool. But maybe if I can initiate a conversation, deepen the intimacy, we can come together, resolve this problem. Maybe that's a conversation we had. Maybe I can't change anything about the situation or this person. I don't want to leave the situation or this person because I've made a commitment to whatever it is at work or whatever it is. Okay, therefore I need to change my mindset. I need to see this situation differently. Like you did. Like, you could take it really personal, like, oh my God, what did I do? And then you get upset and depressed and da da da. Or eventually, what I heard you say is like, wait, this isn't about me. What's going on with that other person? Well, I don't have to be attached to their problems, but I can be curious. I can be curious about them. I can have empathy for them. But I don't have to be like, oh my God, this is about me. No, this is mostly probably about them. And maybe there's a piece of this about me. I need to also reflect, like, oh, maybe I did something incorrect or wrong or partial or limited. I'll look at that and I can self-correct. But I love what you just shared. It's like, I don't have to take everything personally. That is so free. So like I said, it depends where the person is. If they're so stuck in a fixed mindset, I probably wouldn't challenge them immediately to think like that's not true. I might do other angles into the conversation to kind of create a little bit of cognitive flexibility, emotional flexibility, but physical flexibility. So it really depends. But I could do some of the things I just shared in terms of helping to break the spell of like, I have no power, I have no authority, I'm not solving the situation.
I love that. I love what you shared there. I think this is a really powerful part of the conversation. I think I might butcher this, but I'm going to try my best. But there was a great quote, I think, from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, "No one can hurt you unless you allow them." And what I love about that, and by the way, when I first heard that, I completely rejected that, which was quite a few years ago. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, if someone says something or sends the email or is nasty or is difficult, I mean, of course that's going to hurt you. However, it's only on reflection many years later, once doing the work, is that you can release the attachment to the thing. And it's an ongoing piece of work, I think, for me, but also for other people as well, to realize that some of those things, they just don't mean anything unless you allow it to mean something. and maybe they attack your character or they attack your integrity or something like that. So that's a belief, but it's actually a real position of power. And something I love recently, which I've been reading, which is Mel Robbins' the Let Them theory, which is let them, just let them have
That's
their
like that.
view,
Yeah.
let them have their opinion. You don't have to react. And instead of being attacked, you can just step out the way and then move on with your day. And it's so beautiful and so freeing.
And I love that. That is awesome. And I'd say part two of that or stage two of that
Please.
could be what I'm about to share. So someone a couple of years ago accused me of lack of integrity in this particular situation. And I literally had all the evidence, legal evidence, to prove that that was not true. And I'm like, I can defend myself. I'm like, nah, I don't really need to. Like, I have no need to defend myself. I know that's not true. Okay. So that was the Mel Robbins, let it go. I'm like, that's their issue, not mine. Okay. But then I thought about it. I was like, okay, lack of integrity. Now, I didn't lack integrity in this particular situation, and I have the evidence. I know that to be true. But I asked myself a question: do I lack integrity anywhere else? Like, maybe this person's a gift to me. Like they're pointing out something that they don't even know they're pointing out. Gives me time for self-reflection. And I looked at my life and I was like, where do I lack integrity? I was like, oh, wait, in certain areas of my life where I was conflict avoidant and I put my head in the sand because I didn't want to deal with a particular conflict, that's a lack of integrity. Wow, okay. So I looked at that and I was like, I'm going to make a commitment that when a conflict arises, I'm going to deal with it right then and there or sooner after. You can't always deal with it at that very moment, but like, I'm not going to put my head in the sand. I'm going to deal with this, whatever the challenge is with this other person, as quickly as possible. So yes, I let it go in the Buddhist sense. I was not attached, and then I also took it as a moment for self-reflection. Like, is there any truth in that for me? Yes. What can I do with that truth? I can learn and grow and adapt and evolve from it. Cool. So that could be like part two. Let it go, and then also like, oh, let me reflect on that. Is there something that I can learn from?
Yeah, I love it.
What do you
Yeah.
think of
Well,
that?
because you're right. It is step two, because the person wouldn't be doing a thing or saying the thing without cause. Maybe it's their opinion or their view, but also then, and I always love this, self-reflection is a beautiful thing. Like you can reflect on every moment in your life and anything that's happened and think there probably is something I can take from this. I know I've had challenging bosses in the past, different managers that I've worked from, who maybe are completely different to me as in terms of their character and how they hold themselves and how they communicate. And it's about 10 years ago now, I worked for someone completely opposite to me. And I just thought, I just don't understand them. I don't know why they say these things. I don't know why they work this way. And interestingly, that was probably one of the most self-reflective times, because it was like, well, what's this teaching me? What can I get out of this? Like, why did the world bring us together? There's something universal about here. And interestingly, that was a couple of the most successful years I'd ever had, because there was almost like a conflict. There was real conflict between their view and my view, but it made me think about the work that I was doing in exceptionally higher detail, which allowed me to then be far more successful. It's really interesting, a real paradox, a real paradox.
Yeah. And that's actually for me would be an indicator of emotional resilience. Like we were talking about kind of different aspects of resilience. And we talked a little bit about the cognitive stuff, but on the emotional side, it's very similar. It's like what I heard you share, which is awesome. It's like you're not emotionally triggered. I would imagine if you were, you have enough self-reflection to say, wow, this really bothers me. I want to sit with this and allow this to unfold so I can learn something about myself. I can learn something about this relationship. So just go back to the psychological pillar on the emotional side. When I talk to clients, I have three things when it comes to emotionality. Most people don't allow certain emotions to process through their system. Like they don't allow anger or sadness or grief, uh, uh, um, guilt, shame, whatever it is. Like there's usually one or two: happiness, joy, bliss, even some of the more positive ones. People are like, oh, so like I teach people how to just be with their emotions, not as a concept. Oh, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm whatever, but like in the body, like how it flows through the system. Because what I find is if they allow it to flow, and that doesn't mean they act on it, two different things, allow it to flow, it's less likely to come out sideways as passive aggressive behavior or show up as a chronic illness in the long haul. And it also allows you, in the second stage of this, the first stage is allowing it, is to learn how to manage. So you can be in the conversation you have with your boss, or I don't know, you see your boss. Your boss who has a different worldview, different perspective, and you're like, I don't have to be reactive to him, but I can be curious. And I can be curious about why he believes why she believes what she believes, and why she or she holds that worldview. And I can be curious, like, wow, why was I triggered? Like, why did that activate certain feelings in me? Wow, that's what you learn a lot about yourself. You can learn a lot about the other person. You can learn about the relationship. And then the third piece, if appropriate, like, how do you express emotions in a healthy way? Sometimes you need to tell your partner, your wife, your husband, like you're angry at him or her. You need to share that you're in deep grief over a loss. You're sad about certain things. You're frustrated. But can you do it in a way that serves you, serves the other, and serves the relationship? For me, that's interpersonal resilience as well as emotional resilience. Awareness of, management of, and healthy expression of emotion.
Interesting, fascinating. I've just got a quick question on this before we move on for more of the other pieces. On the emotional piece, should we be, when we have a strong emotion, you mentioned sadness or anger or any of those emotions, those strong emotions, how should we should we allow those emotions to happen and be to be there? Or like how's like when you have a really strong emotion, what's the best approach to it?
So I would say it's contextual, situational. Like if you're at work and you get really pissed at your boss, probably not the best idea to express it then and there. you know, So you got to be smart on how you do these things. But the first step is never to repress emotion. Just be aware that they're there, and like how they literally show up in the body, like the breath, the posture, the muscle tone, in the organs, like how it shows up, how you feel that. Because if you don't, like I said, it's going to come out sideways, or it could show up as a chronic illness if you try to repress it. And then what I teach clients to do is how to manage those emotions. Meaning, like, if you're really angry and you know you're going to say or do something really stupid and have a negative consequence to your marriage or your employment, there's certain exercises you can do, certain breathing exercises to relax the system, certain mantras you can do in the mind to relax the system, certain bodily postures that you can do to relax the system. But I'm not saying deny your anger. Be aware of it. It's valuable information. It tells you something about the world you're living in inside yourself and in relation to someone else. Really valuable. But you can do these exercises to kind of calm the system down so you can take better decisions. For instance, if you're really pissed, you're going to have less access to the prefrontal cortex, the executive function. So you're going to probably make you're going to make less well decisions. You can relax the system, recognize your anger. Maybe you need a new boundary, but if you calm the system down, you can express it in healthier ways. I had a client, unfortunately, his wife died, and he was in deep grief, but he was then responsible for the kids, his medical practice, and the funeral, like all within like 2 week period of time. He had to take care of all these things. So for him, he did not have time in that 2 week period of time to have the deep grief of loss of his wife. He needed to take care of families, kids, family coming in town for the funeral, all that stuff. But he knew enough. He's like, I know I need to deal with this grief, but you just can't deal with it right now. So I got to stay front side focused and take care of these things. And after the 2 or 3 weeks was up and, the funeral was done and the kids were not okay, but like, settling down, then he started dealing with his grief. So you can learn to manage it in in the moment, but you find healthy ways to express it at the right time later.
Wow. Oh, I feel my heart really goes out to that poor guy. I mean, I can't even. There's nothing more imaginally horrific than losing that critical person in your life. Gosh, your wife and mother of your children. I can't even begin to understand how he could have been feeling, and his whole entire life is in tatters.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, ways I think about emotional resilience, awareness of, management of, and healthy expression of emotions. And it's very interpersonal. And I'll use anger, if that's okay, as an example. So what I'll tell clients, if I'm working with a client and let's just say he doesn't do anger. Like I don't do anger. Like I'm not really comfortable with anger. I repress it. So what I might work with, if I'm working with them as a couple, like he and his wife, for instance, I might suggest like to them, like, okay, I think it's healthier. It's healthy if you learn to express your anger in healthy ways, not like throwing things and screaming and yelling. That's not really helpful. But I know when you practice going from zero, like had no experience with my anger except for repressing it, to learning to express it, you're going to do it kind of poorly at first. You just, because you don't have any experience, you don't know how to do it. Okay. So you have a conversation with your wife and you say something along the lines of, I don't do anger very well till now. I want to learn to express my anger in healthy ways. I'm not going to do it great the first couple of times. I'm going to ask you to hold the space for me so I can practice and give me feedback. Maybe not in that moment, but after the fact, and we can continue to have this conversation until I feel comfortable myself to express anger. You feel comfortable to receive the anger at her. Not no violence. There's no violence. I'm not talking about anything violence. Just a verbal expression of anger, whatever it happens to be. And then they work together to create the space for him to practice new things. That does two things. First of all, it's really healthy for him to express his anger. There might be boundaries that he needs to share with her, and that leads to some amazing conversations between the two of them. How they want to rethink some of the things that they do together, or maybe he wants her to show up slightly differently in parts of their marriage. Cool, and they can have that open, honest conversation. No mind reading. Like, this is literally what I'm feeling. Like, I express my anger, and then underneath the anger, I'm like, wow, I realize that I'm angry because I'm having certain needs not being met. Let me share with you those needs. And she's like, wow, I'd love to hear what your needs are. Like, I'm not really a big fan of your anger, but I understand why you're angry, because you feel like your needs are not getting met. You share what your needs are in this particular case. Hopefully she can give him what he needs 80% of the time, not can't all the time. And the anger can disappear because he no longer feels like violated, some boundary that's violated or some need that's being unmet. So you learn to express the emotion, then you do the deep dive. Well, what's the thing underneath the emotion? And that, like I said, leads to some amazing intimate conversations with your partner if you're in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, that's really profound. That's incredible. That's incredible, the sort of progression someone can make with that by being really open, vulnerable, transparent. Yeah, that's really special. So just thinking about the framework. So we talked about physiological, we talked about psychological. What are the next steps?
Yeah. So the other two are social and environmental, and there's more pieces to the psychological one, but we don't have to do my whole program. The social one is threefold. They say you're the average of the five people around you. Okay, so keep that in mind as part of this conversation in terms of mindset. Okay, I find when I work with individuals, and I eventually I start working with a couple, because I'll work with individuals sometimes. I start with a couple sometimes. That if one of them is on the growth path, but the other is not on the growth path, that the one who's not on the growth path feels very insecure about this other person growing, evolving, and learning and adapting, and might unconsciously and sometimes consciously try to undermine it, give them a hard time. They're afraid of losing them, right? So when I work with an individual client, even if I'm not working with them as a couple, I might bring their partner in. I might bring their workmate in. I might bring a friend into the conversation. So we can have a conversation about what this person needs in terms of their support for their own growth and development. So it can reduce the insecurities from these other people who are afraid of losing this person because they're on a different path. Okay, so that's one. I call it social ecology, like your groups of people that you're part of. Do they understand you? Do they support you? They hold you accountable? Those kind of things, and vice versa. What kind of relationship do you have with them? So we kind of mapped out your social system, and we look to see where the weak links in terms of the support and accountability you need, or the weak links in the support and accountability you offer. And we try to clean that up. That's one piece of it. The second piece is communities of practice. Like I might work with someone and they're like, hey, I want to be much more physically capable. Okay, let's find you a physically challenging community, like CrossFit, if that's your thing. Or maybe you want to do a martial art, you want to join a dojo and train in the martial arts. Cool. But you try to find a community that supports you and growth in an area of your life. So we kind of map those things out. Or maybe you're intellectual. You're like, I want to join a book club. Cool. Let's find a book club that supports the kind of intellectual curiosity. Yeah, that's awesome. You have a community that supports that aspect of growth. Or maybe you're like religiously inclined. Great. If you're a Christian, maybe you find a Bible community. Or if you're Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist, whatever your religious trip is, like maybe you want to be part of those communities that do spiritual practices together. Pray, meditate, do breath work, chanting, whatever the practices are within a particular community. Read the spiritual book, awesome, and then discuss it in great depth. Great, let's find those communities for you. Or interpersonally, I used to co-lead an intimacy group, which taught men and women how to be more intimate with each other, not sexually, but vulnerably, emotionally. Maybe you need that. I co-lead a men's group. Maybe you want to be around other men to learn how to, what's it like to be a man in today's society. Cool. Join that group. So we map out these different groups that they might want to be part of for their own development, and then I encourage them to join and see how it works for them. That's the second part. Before I go to the third part of it, let me.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's really interesting in terms of the social groups, the people that you're with, and that connection that you have with people. It really makes a huge difference to who you are and who you become based on the social interactions that you have. And I feel like during COVID, that's what was lost for so many people, was that connection to whatever social group that you're part of. I was part of the CrossFit community, and I go to the gym regularly. To have that taken away, it was almost a point of like sense of self, sense of where's my community, where's my group gone. And then for me, I personally carried on training, and I went running. But there's nothing, going to the gym and seeing lots of people that you know, and hi, how you doing, and that there's that community there versus being very isolated, going on very long runs on your own. I'm talking about a very specific situation, but I feel like it's one of the most foundational parts of our human existence, is to have connection, not only at home, but out in the community in some way. And the great thing is, it doesn't, whatever you're interested in, I say interest, that's not the right word, but whatever you're drawn to, because that might be a religious group, a church group, it might be the book club, like you say, or the gym in my instance, whatever that is, there's almost like a homecoming for you as a human being to be part of that group in some respects. So don't know how you would define it, but I feel like it's like one of the pillars, one of the key pillars that you need.
Yeah, it leads me to a few different tangents on that one. So, we evolved in tribes, small tribes, like this whole, the way we live now, agricultural, industrial, information ages, that's relatively new in the span of human history. And I think there's an innate need for us to be part of tribe, both for survival purposes, but also for, connection, intimacy, safety, security, all those things go woven together. For fun, playfulness, all this stuff. You watch kids, and for the most part, unless there's a problem with the kids, they love to play with each other. They come up with games, and they engage with one another. So I think it's kind of innate in us to want to be around other people. For the most part, there's some people who are really hyper introverted, and they don't really like other people. Okay, but I think it can be for most people really healthy. And I'd say, especially for men, you look at the research, they seem to be much more isolated than women might be, at least here in the States. I don't know about the UK, but that's a problem. So finding a group of people you can spend time with, both for fun and support and accountability in whatever area, like say intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is, that I think is really, really important for health and well-being. I think if you're looking at like longevity research, social isolation actually reduces survivability over the long haul. You have more social connection, you actually tend to live longer. But there's a biological need for connection as well.
Why do you feel, so let's chat about it in regards to the context of men for a second, because I know quite a number of guys who are getting past their 40s now, as I am, and their friendship groups have reduced down to a very small number. Like the people that you used to go to college with, your work groups got reduced. You're now in a situation with your family, in my instance, family and wife and children. But the social circle has now reduced to nearly zero. Why do you feel, interesting, I talked to my dad about this a lot because he doesn't see any of his friends anymore. He's got obviously a few family members close to him. But as we get older, just our social groups just reduce so much. And then I look at my wife and she's got lots of friends and family and people will come around and see the baby. I haven't had to sit down and have a coffee with a friend for a decade, probably. It's so funny, but she'll have 10 people come in a week and sit down and have a chat and a coffee about the baby. It's incredible. It's so totally different. What do you think is different with us as men, as creatures, as human beings, that's stopping us naturally as being or preventing us being as social as maybe women are?
Well, let me ask you the question, since you brought yourself up as an example. Why do you imagine you're less social? Might have been.
I think it's priorities. I focus on the family and I focus on work and I focus on the gym. So it's like that. I feel like those are my three key staples, the things that I do, those three things. And I feel like anything that's outside of that sort of either distracts me or I just don't make time for it. And I just focus on those three things. I focus on being responsible for the family, ensuring that they're fed, watered, in a good place, and physically, emotionally, everything taken care of. As the number one pillar. Actually, that's a second. That's not true. No, number one pillar is my health and fitness, so therefore that's what I focus on. The number two pillar is my family, and then the number three is my work and everything else, which obviously feeds everything. So I feel like I just don't give it the time. There's less time now, and I focus on what I feel like is my priorities.
Yeah. No, okay. So I would suggest, like, if we were working together, I might suggest to you as a thought experiment. Imagine the following to be true. Imagine if you had a social circle of guys who you went to do stuff with, and I don't mean like go to the bar and get drunk and do stupid shit. Like, go do things with. And I can give you an example of that if you'd like. But if you did that, then you'd actually be happier, healthier, more fit, and show up more deeply for your family. If I said that to you as a thought experiment, you tried it and noticed that was true, would you then incorporate that into your life? Because those other three pillars would be amplified.
My answer to that is yes, I think so. I think so because that's the natural answer based on that question. My immediate response to that is, but that means I'm taking away time from my kids at the weekend, for example. So I think the challenge is when you're in this situation, especially with young children, is I'm thinking about where does my time go? Now, if I'm at work, that's productive. It's feeding and supporting the family. If I'm not at work, and not at the gym, obviously, then I feel like I should be with my family. So, and then I think about the routine, how regularly you're going to meet up, how much effort it is, and which group is it going to be? Like, then I just think it just makes more sense to look after the kids.
So, and now to the example. So I co-founded an organization called Team Foodington. And it's a group here in the States. Also, we have some Canadian members, and we get together, we do really hard things. So last summer, we did a 50-mile go ruck. We trained up for different parts of the States. So we're training up for that. I'm here in Austin, Texas. I go to Lady Bird Lake. It's a lake 10 miles around outside of Austin. And I meet up with a crew of people, and we do 10 miles with heavy weights around the lake. And it's really fascinating because I was 53 at the time. I'm 54 now. All the guys, there's one wife, but all the guys who attended were between 21 and 31. Young, all could be my children. Like, they're all young guys, which kind of makes me feel old. But I was able to keep up with them. So physically, it was really cool. But to a guy, they would say, man, this is great. They like to be physically active. It's good exercise. But like, we actually have a group of guys we can hang out with and talk to. And the talking to is at two different levels. One, bullshit guy stuff. Like, guys just like to bullshit about stuff. Cool. That's awesome. And then like deep, serious conversations, like my girlfriend, my wife, my kids, just a place to talk about what's going on in their life and get support, some accountability. And what these, literally to the guy, they would say is like, we don't have a place for this. Like, on occasion we might go to the bar, drink, but then it's loud. We can't really have deep conversations. It's silly, all that stuff. But this is a place for us to go and have those kind of conversations. So with that said, maybe a suggestion to you, let's just assume you do CrossFit 4 times a week or 3 times a week. Maybe you pick up rucking and you find a group of guys to go rucking with just for 2 hours. Camaraderie, connection, tribe. You're also physically training, so you're not really taking away time. You're still doing the physical training thing. You just do one less CrossFit workout, but you're getting your guy time in. Maybe that is a way to work around, like, I don't want to take away time from
It's an
family.
amazing solution.
As a thought.
It's a great solution. It's combating.
Yeah.
It still allows me to be training, to be keeping fit, to be healthy. So it's still the number one objective that I have is to look after myself, my mind, my body, etc. So it's still supporting that objective, but it's also given me a level of connection which is definitely missing in my life today. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's so many guys that I'm talking to, whether it's on this podcast or just generally, and they all kind of are missing a bit of connection. And it's definitely a point of life. But you're right. How easy would that be to just go rucking, be outside? I love the idea of it. I'm definitely going to research into it and see if I can find my tribe.
And that's awesome. And a suggestion too,
Please.
if you're inclined to send another suggestion. One of our guys would come, he and his wife was female, always came to the rocks. They sometimes with their kids, and to make the training harder, you put the kid on his backpack. It's like, and then she would push, sometimes she would push the kid. Not that you have to bring your children, but if you so choose to, you get kid time, guy time, and physical fitness time all worked up together.
Yeah, well,
That's
I can
also
definitely,
something to
at the
consider,
moment, Logan's 4, so I can definitely bring him on my shoulders, but in a couple of years, maybe not.
Well, or you start now, in a couple of years you can, because you get stronger.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I feel like this is turning into a coaching session for me, so I appreciate it. So we've just talked about the connection piece. Is there anything else on social that we should touch on before we move into the environment piece?
Well, yeah, the last little piece on the social stuff, and this is on both sides. So like when I have a client who has a therapist or a doctor or whatever they have, I will engage in conversation with that person if appropriate. Make sure we're on the same page. I don't want to do anything contrary to a doctor or contrary to their therapist. But also, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, and I have an amazing network. So I have like a team behind me. So like, there's a gentleman named Will Ravello. He's a former Army Special Forces guy. He's my trainer. He trains me. So like, if one of my clients needs a physical trainer, dude, I got him. C. McDermott, she's an epigenetics coach. If one of my clients needs an epigenetics coach, boom, I got one. I work with Dr. Dan Stickler. If someone needs a precision-based medical doctor who can do all the great testing and stuff like that, and epigenetically, boom, I have a doctor in mind. So like, I have a great team of people behind me if my clients need a specialist in any particular area of human growth and development, either it's health or psychological or interpersonal or whatever happens.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible to have such an amazing network.
I'm very lucky. Yeah. And then you asked about the environmental, the environmental piece. So the environmental piece has two pieces to it. And, I always try to think holistically. So if you probably talk to me in 5 years, hopefully this model is expanded, right? Because I'm always trying to think, like, what am I missing? So this is my present day model. On the environmental piece, I asked the question, two different things. What is in your environment that's supporting who you are becoming? And what's your environment that's detracting from who you want to be? We look at your home, we look at your office, we look at your transportation. And the easiest example is like, if you said to me, "Hey, Michael, I'm trying not to eat sugar." You talk about that. Look, I'm trying to manage my sugar intake towards zero or some low number of carbs from that sugar place. Cool. And we do a walk around from your office. Like if you put your camera down and there's a bowl of M&Ms in front of you, I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying there is.
Just like so, but I promise there's none anywhere.
That's awesome. So no M&Ms. But if there were, and you claim that your interest is reducing sugar intake, I'd be like, well, why are you wasting your willpower points not eating the candy in front of you on the desk? So we go through your home, your transportation, your office, and remove things via negative of what we need to remove that don't support you. Right? Like M&Ms on the table in front of you. Via positiva is like, what do we need to add to your environment? And if it's okay with you, I'll give you 3 examples. Okay. So I had a client who was training up for Kokoro Camp at SEALFIT. Kokoro Camp is modeled after Navy SEAL Hell Week, but it's 50 hours instead of 5 days. It's for civilians instead of for possible Navy SEALs. And it's for a company I worked for called SEALFIT. And he was training up for it. And he you have to do PSTs, you have to pass certain standards in order to even end this event. And he's having trouble with his pull-ups. You have to do a certain number of pull-ups. So I'm like, all right. So I said, get a pull-up bar and put it, you get those home pull-up bars, you put it at the door. I said, put it in your home office door. Every time you walk underneath it to go to the bathroom, drink coffee, have lunch, breakfast, go out, walk your dogs, every time you come in and out, you have to do pull-ups. By the end of the day, he's doing about 20 extra pull-ups a day. So by the time he gets to his PSTs, pull-ups are easy. So like, cool. What do you need to add to your environment to support these new behaviors? Pull-up bar. That's fantastic. Now, I had another client who was Greek Orthodox, and he really wanted to get back into his faith. I said, all right, do you have a place for prayer, meditation, contemplation? No. Let's create one. What are the books in your tradition that you want to have available? Are there any icons for the wall? Incense, prayer beads, whatever you might need for this space that you can walk into, and it's a constant reminder of the type of person you want to be in Christian faith, particularly Greek Orthodox faith. So he created this space for himself. That's another example of via positiva. What do you need in your environment to create the more opportunity for you to do what you want to do, to become the person you want to be? And I have one more example, but
No, keep going. I really love this because it's real. You're bringing in the ability to do a micro moment, like a micro habit, like the pull-ups. I love that. Instead of just now you wait, you go to the gym, then you try and do some, you do one chin up, you can't really do it. Then you need to have a 5-minute rest, etc. But instead of that, you're saying, let's make it a part of your environment. And every time you do something, the next action is you do a chin up. Like you have a coffee, you go to the toilet. I think that's great because, by the end of the day, you've done 20, but before you couldn't do any. So I love just how you're bringing that in. Yes, brilliant. But please keep going. It's an awesome approach.
And to speak, I can speak to myself personally. You can't see it because it's in the other room, but I have kettlebells and other kind of cool equipment for training. Not for like 3-hour workouts, but like, hey, I'm between podcasts, I'm between clients, and I do 5 minutes of movement practice. Just get the energy moving, the body moving. Cool. And by the end of the day, it's literally a workout. It's like they're adding in, and this is not my workout. Like I go to the gym and I do physical training 6 days a week, 6 o'clock in the morning. This is just to break up the day, so I have some movement practices, which is really important. The other example I'll give, and I heard you say you're like during COVID, you started running. And it's funny because I'll have clients like, I really want to run. I was like, all right, great. Where are your running shoes? Oh, they're in the basement. Or where are your shorts and t-shirts or whatever clothes you need to wear? They're also in the basement. All right, cool. Whatever equipment you need for this particular activity, put it by the front door or wherever you need to get to it. So it's literally, you see it every day. It's easily accessible. Because it's out of sight, out of mind, and you're like, oh, it's down in the basement. I have other things I need to do. And it's these, like you said, there's these micro things that you can do to just make it more likely to be disciplined about these practices. So you're spending less cognitive energy trying to oh, shouldn't, where is it? I don't know. And I also will have them do cyberly too, like on their computers, clean up your mess. Your messes around you, so you have easy access to the information you need, so you're not overwhelmed. That's also a part of this too. So that's half of the environmental piece.
Yeah, keep going into it. Keep going.
Okay, cool. So the other part is, I work with clients and they're trying to get really healthy. So they're eating well, they're exercising, and then let's just say I'm talking to a female. I'm like, oh, great. So you're doing all these wonderful things for yourself. Tell me about your cosmetics, your hair products, your cleaning supplies, or for the man. Some men wear they wear cleaning the hair stuff or cleaning supplies, and they how what they're using. And I say, well, do a Google search on the ingredients in that particular product and see what effect it might have on your physiology. Because some things that we just take for granted are carcinogenic or neurotoxic. Like, you might want to consider not putting that stuff on your skin, your hair, on your body. So start thinking about your environment. What can you clean up your environment so you reduce the likelihood of negative consequences in the health space? And in some cases, what can you add to your environment to increase the likelihood of positive health benefits? Like there are certain plants that you might want to get if you have a green thumb to have positive benefits to your environment, to your health well-being. There's certain filters you can have for the water supply, increase the likelihood of healthier versions of water, or HEPA filters for, making sure you have good, clean air. Certain lights you can use that are actually positive for you, as opposed to some of the lights we use, which have negative consequences on melatonin production, as an example, in your home, what I'm referring to. So, you can start thinking about how your environment has an effect on your psychophysiology, and then make better decisions there.
Yeah.
That's part of the work too.
That's so interesting about the cosmetics and like the shampoos and all those sorts of things. I never thought about that having a detrimental impact on your health.
Yeah, and it's easy. I mean, there's apps now that you can look into these apps, give you some valuable information. But yeah, I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm not claiming to be an environmental scientist. Do your research, look at the products, look at the ingredients, and see if there's any concerns of those ingredients. Like in Europe, they do a much better job here than the States. And I think with this new administration, with Kennedy now running HHS, you might see some shifts in things that are allowed here in this country, America, versus what's allowed in Europe. There's some coloring agents and dyes that are not allowed in Europe that are allowed here, for instance. So I'd be really curious, like some of these things are shifting here. What we're allowed to put in our products versus what you guys are allowed to have in some of your products there in Europe or UK. But just be mindful of that and make better decisions for yourself.
Wow, I never even thought about it. Definitely something I'm going to consider. So is there anything else on environmental you feel like we should be covering?
So another piece, I'm a dog lover. All right. I love dogs. Used to have dogs. And this is also a piece of my work too. And I'll tell people, if you have an animal, you can have a cat too, whatever your thing is. And this is part of the environmental thing. Keep in mind that, I'll just stick with dogs. I know more about dogs. It's a species and it's a breed and it's a unique individual. So your dog, in terms of the breed, has different needs than another breed. And most people don't know that. So study, what does your particular breed need different than other breeds? Some breeds need a lot more physical activity and some breeds need a lot less physical activity. For instance, I had a bulldog. I love my bulldog. She passed away. But she has as a breed, certain health conditions that are naturally seemingly show up in the breed and you need to be aware of. And then each animal is unique personality. And the reason this is important to me is twofold. One, because I want you to take good care of your animal, because I love animals. And it's important, but you start thinking about unique breed, individual, and you're like, wow, they actually have unique dietary needs. And it's also unique to that individual animal. Maybe I should feed it differently. Something more conducive in an evolutionary sense to what they've evolved to eat over time versus this processed stuff. And you do that for your animal and you start noticing that their coat gets healthier. They're a lot more alive and energetic. You're like, wow, that is a reflection of you. Because you're doing the same thing for yourself. Like, wow, I'm eating different. I'm feeling better. Cool. They're eating better. They're feeling better. They're eating different. They're feeling better too. It's like, the more you do that inside your family dynamic, your animals, your kids, you and your spouse, that whole dynamic changes everything. There's a lot more energy in the system, a lot more fun and playfulness can occur. So I think that's really important too. And it's also, as I said, kind of self-reflective because you start thinking like, wow, unique breed, unique animal. I need to understand them better. That's perspective. And it goes to what you said much more earlier. Like, why is that person doing that? Why is my dog doing that? Why is my child doing that? And it leads me to, if you don't mind me telling a story real briefly of a guy I work with in terms of individuality and the uniqueness of the individual kid. So I had a guy come to work with me. He's like, I work for a lot of Navy SEALs. So like he came to me, he was like, I want to be more mentally tough. Cool. Okay. I do that. I can help you be more mentally tough, emotionally resilient. And he's sharing a story about his son who spilled, I think his son was like 5 years old, 5 or 6. And his son spilled milk. And he was trying to show me how he was a disciplinarian and he yelled at his kid and made his kid clean up the milk and blah, 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 blah. And I'm a family therapist. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's not what I mean by mental toughness. Okay. And so I just started asking him questions like about his relationship with his son. He's like, yeah, and my son's kind of scared of me. He doesn't really want to spend time with me. I'm thinking maybe because you scare him, like the way you treat him as if he's an adult and he can understand what he did wrong and kind of threaten him with, not violence. He didn't get violent, but like, I'm a big guy and I'll tell you what to do. You better be, he's a kid. He's 5 years old. He doesn't have the same way of thinking about the world that you do. So when I started working with this guy, I was like, okay, what I want you to do is understand your child, get to his level and understand how he sees the world. And he started doing that over time, and he started relaxing. He started engaging his son differently. And his son spilled milk another time, like maybe a month later. And instead of yelling at the son, and he saw his son cringe when he spilled the milk, because he knew his father was going to yell at him. He got on the floor with them, and in a very calm voice, just says, "Oh, it's a shame you spilled the milk. We really don't want to do that, but let's clean it up." And then he made a game out of it. And so that was kind of, they kept playing, made a game out of it. He taught his son lessons, but not through that strict discipline. And I talked to him a couple of years later, and I talked to him quite a few years later, actually. He said he had an amazing relationship with his son. He and his son go out and do all kinds of fun things as a result of being able to connect with his son by seeing his son who he was as an individual at that stage of development. Very similar to seeing your dog as an individual at the stage of development. I'm not comparing dogs and kids, but it's a very similar, like, mental, emotional approach to dealing with other people, other beings. Get to their level, understand who they are. And that changed their dynamic, which is just,
that is a beautiful thing. That's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. I'm so happy for that father to be able to have that kind of relationship with his son into the future, because there's nothing more beautiful than having that long-term relationship with your kids.
Mm. Amen. Yeah. So that's the four.
Remind me, what's the framework that we've been discussing?
Yeah, so I have a framework when I work with individuals, which I just walk through, and it's my resilience framework. It's physiological, psychological, social, and environmental. I have a different framework, but similar oriented for couples, which we don't have time to get into. But if you ever want me to back, we can talk about my couples work. We can definitely do that. But it's also a 3-pillar program. I like pillars for some reason. But yeah, the one we just walked through, the 4 pillars for.
Well, I would love to talk to you about the relationship one. So I certainly would love to see that. Obviously, when we have another time, and we're arranging another session, so we'll chat about that in a moment. But so to summarize, what we've been talking about is the resilience framework, and we've been talking about the physiological, which is like sleep, the food that you're eating. We're thinking about the psychological, which is your, the cognitive functions. We're thinking about journaling. We're thinking about meditation. We're thinking about all the things that are positive for you from an intellectual, from a cognitive perspective. And then we were talking about social. So what's your social connections? We talked about groups, and you kindly gave me some advice and guidance, which I could probably actually take from this conversation, which is, instead of going that extra day to the gym, can I go out, hiking or rucking, because I'm missing that kind of social connection, which has been on my mind for a few years now, which is great. So it's that connection. And then the last piece was the environment, the people that you're around, who you are. And I love the bit that you were talking about. It's, who are you trying to become, or who are you looking to become? And how does the people and the way you're communicating with those people allow for that to happen? It's a great framework. I really love it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's 30 years in the making, and hopefully it's evolving over time as well.
Yeah, it's been a really wonderful conversation. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today. I can't even believe the time when I look at it and I realize how long we've been talking for, but it's been such a great conversation. If someone wants to know more about you, work with you, get engaged, what's the best way of reaching out?
Yeah, so my website is Michael, Michael, the letter D, as in Dave, with just the letter D. Last name Ostrolenk, OSTROLENK.com. I'm on Instagram, Ostrolenk. I'm on Twitter, Ostrolenk. You can find me on LinkedIn, Michael David Ostrolenk, and Facebook as well. But most likely, probably the website is probably the better way of connecting and seeing what I do, and then reaching out to me there if you want to have a discovery call to see if it's a good fit.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. You've taught me some things. I've taken some actions from it. So it's been a real great conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Nice. Thanks.